My name is Lincoln, 23 years old, fresh University of Michigan graduate. The backyard celebration should have been perfect until my brother Nathan raised his glass. Crazy you finished, you'll probably end up jobless anyway. Dad chuckled while I swallowed my pride silent. Nobody knew I had co-signed Nathan's business loan application just days earlier. That night, staring at those papers, I made a decision that would change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe to see how I finally stood up to my family after years of disrespect. Growing up in suburban Detroit wasn't easy when you lived in a shadow. Nathan, my older brother by 5 years, cast the longest shadow of all. From the moment I could remember, our family dynamic was crystal clear. Nathan was the golden child, and I was the afterthought. Our childhood home was nice enough from the outside, a 4-bedroom colonial with a well-kept lawn in a respectable neighborhood. But inside those walls, the invisible hierarchy was unmistakable. Nathan had the bigger bedroom, the newer clothes, and most importantly, our parents' undivided attention and admiration. My brother was naturally athletic, charismatic, and popular. He played quarterback on the high school football team, dated cheerleaders, and had a social circle that seemed to include half the town. When he walked into a room, he owned it with his loud laugh and confident swagger. Adults were charmed by his quick wit and easy smile, always telling my parents how lucky they were to have such a wonderful boy. I, on the other hand, was quiet and academically focused. Social situations made me anxious, and I found comfort in books and computers rather than parties and sports. While Nathan was scoring touchdowns, I was winning science fairs and math competitions. But somehow my achievements never seemed to measure up. "Another A on your report card. That's nice," Lincoln Mom would say with a distracted nod before turning her attention back to planning Nathan's next football banquet. Dad was even more transparent in his favoritism. "You know your brother was team captain by junior year," he'd comment, while half-heartedly glancing at my perfect SAT score. What hurt most was Nathan's subtle undermining, the backhanded compliments and dismissive remarks that chipped away at my confidence year after year. "Good job on that scholarship, bro," he'd say with a smirk. "At least being a nerd pays off sometimes." Or when I was accepted to the University of Michigan's computer science program, "Michigan's okay, I guess. Too bad you didn't get into MIT or something actually impressive." The pattern continued throughout our youth. Nathan would borrow money from me, $20 here, $50 there, with vague promises of repayment that never materialized. He'd borrow my laptop when his broke, returning it with mysterious stains and missing keys. Once he even took my car without asking, and returned it with an empty gas tank and a dented fender, laughing it off as no big deal. Despite all this, I still craved my parents' approval. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I worked hard enough and achieved enough, they'd finally see my worth. So I threw myself into academics, graduating high school as valedictorian. My speech that day was attended by Mom and Dad, who left immediately after to attend Nathan's intramural softball game. While I went to college and maintained a perfect GPA, Nathan dropped out of state after 3 semesters. He claimed college was too restrictive for his entrepreneurial spirit. What followed was a series of half-baked business ventures: a power washing service that lasted 2 months, a drop-shipping website that never made a sale, and a food truck that failed health inspection. Each failure was met with understanding and financial support from our parents. "He's finding his path," they'd explain. "Not everyone is meant for traditional education like you, Lincoln." Meanwhile, I worked part-time at the university computer lab and took summer internships to help cover my tuition and expenses. My parents contributed the minimum they could afford, explaining that Nathan's ventures needed their financial backing. "You're so good at managing money," Mom would say, as if my frugality was a choice rather than a necessity. During my senior year, Nathan announced his latest sure thing, opening a sports bar near campus. He had apparently found a location, created a business plan with someone else's help, no doubt, and needed only to secure funding. "The bank needs a co-signer," he explained during a family dinner that spring. "Someone with good credit." My parents immediately volunteered me. "Lincoln has perfect credit," Dad said proudly, one of the few times he'd acknowledged any accomplishment of mine. "And he'll have a good job soon with that computer degree. The bank will love that." I sat there, fork midway to my mouth, as they discussed my financial future as if I weren't in the room. "It's what family does," Mom added, patting my hand. "We support each other." I wanted to point out the one-sided nature of this support, but instead nodded quietly. Perhaps this was my chance to finally earn my place in the family. Maybe if I helped Nathan succeed, they'd finally see me as valuable too. So I agreed to co-sign the loan application, $100,000 for startup costs, renovations, and initial inventory. Nathan assured me it was just a formality. "You won't have to pay a dime, bro. This place is going to be a gold mine." I signed the papers 1 week before my graduation with Nathan, promising he'd begin the process immediately after my ceremony and celebration. "Your graduation gift to me," he joked, not realizing how painful those words were. As I walked across the stage to receive my computer science degree with honors, I scanned the audience. Mom and Dad were there, but they were looking at their phones. Nathan hadn't even shown up. Later, I learned he was meeting with potential bar staff that day. My achievement, 4 years in the making, wasn't important enough to warrant his full attention. Little did I know that the graduation party would be where everything finally came to a head. The graduation party was my mother's idea. "We should celebrate this milestone," she insisted, though I suspected she was more excited about showing off our backyard renovation to the neighbors than celebrating my degree. It was a beautiful May afternoon, the kind that makes Michigan feel like paradise after a long winter. Our backyard was decorated with blue and maize streamers, University of Michigan colors, and a banner that read, "Congratulations, graduate," hung from the deck. Mom had ordered catering from a local deli, and Dad had set up the bar with enough alcohol to serve twice our guest list. I invited several friends from college: James, my roommate of 3 years, Sophia, my study partner from algorithm class, and a handful of others from the computer science department. These were people who had seen my hard work firsthand, who had pulled all-nighters with me before exams, and celebrated each small victory along the way. The party started at 2 o'clock. By 2:30, most guests had arrived except Nathan. My parents kept glancing at their watches, and the driveway, their attention clearly divided. "I wonder where your brother is," Mom muttered every few minutes, as if his absence was the most notable aspect of my graduation party. I tried to enjoy myself despite this, catching up with relatives I rarely saw, and accepting congratulations from family friends. Several people asked about my job prospects, and I explained that I had 3 promising interviews lined up for the following week. At 3:15, Nathan finally made his entrance. He pulled up in his new leased BMW, music blasting loudly enough to draw everyone's attention. He sauntered into the backyard, wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a small gift bag. "The party can start now," he announced, as if we hadn't been celebrating for over an hour. My parents immediately gravitated toward him. Dad clapped him on the back while Mom fussed over his wind-blown hair. "We were getting worried," she said, though her tone conveyed admiration rather than concern. "Had to finalize some details for the bar," Nathan explained loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Things are really coming together. Just waiting on that loan approval." For the next hour, Nathan dominated the party that was supposedly in my honor. He moved from group to group, charming my relatives and entertaining my friends with exaggerated stories. My parents orbited him like proud satellites, laughing at his jokes and adding supporting details to his tales. I stood by the food table watching this familiar scene play out. James approached, handing me another beer. "Your brother always this much of a spotlight hog?" he asked quietly. I shrugged. "For as long as I can remember." Around 4:30, Dad called for everyone's attention. "Time for a toast to our graduate," he announced, raising his glass. I felt a momentary surge of hope. Maybe this would be the genuine recognition I'd been waiting for. But then Dad handed the floor to Nathan. "I think Lincoln's big brother should do the honors," he said with a wink. Nathan took center stage, glass raised high. The yard fell silent as everyone turned to hear his words. I noticed his smirk, the one that always preceded some cutting remark disguised as humor. "To my little brother Lincoln," he began, his voice carrying across the yard. "Crazy you finished, you'll probably end up jobless anyway." There was a beat of awkward silence. Then my father chuckled, which seemed to give others permission to laugh uncomfortably. My mother's smile tightened, but she said nothing. "I mean computer science." In this economy, Nathan continued doubling down. But hey, when your bar business fails, I might let you wash dishes at my place. More uncomfortable laughter. I maintained a smile, though inside I was crumbling. This moment of achievement, 4 years of hard work, late nights, and sacrifice reduced to a punchline at my expense. I glanced around at my friends. James was scowling. Sophia stared at her shoes. No one spoke up. To Lincoln, Nathan finally concluded, as if his roast had been an appropriate toast. May your student loans be the only debt you accumulate. The irony of his words wasn't lost on me, considering the loan I had co-signed for him. As people dispersed after the toast, Mom approached me. You know, Nathan was just joking, she said, patting my arm. He's proud of you in his own way. But I had seen no pride in his eyes, only the same dismissive attitude he'd always shown toward me and my accomplishments. For the next hour, I moved through my own party like a ghost, making small talk and accepting congratulations that now felt hollow. From across the yard, I overheard Nathan loudly discussing his bar plans with my uncle. It's going to revolutionize the local scene, he boasted. Sports bar up front, club atmosphere in back. I've got suppliers lined up, staff interviews scheduled. Just waiting on the final loan approval. That's a big undertaking, my uncle remarked. How are you financing it? Got a loan application in process, Nathan replied casually. Lincoln co-signed, so approval is basically guaranteed with his credit score and new degree. The little nerd is finally useful for something. He laughed, unaware or uncaring that I might overhear. In that moment, watching my brother use my achievement as a stepping stone for his own gain, while simultaneously belittling it, something shifted inside me. I looked around at my family, my father laughing at Nathan's jokes, my mother hovering around him with offers of more food, my relatives engaged by his charismatic storytelling. Then I looked at my friends, the people who had actually supported and valued me. James caught my eye and raised his eyebrows as if to ask, "You okay?" Sophia gave me a sympathetic smile. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself at a crossroads. For years I had accepted my role in this family, the reliable one, the responsible one, the one whose achievements were acknowledged with a pat on the head before attention returned to Nathan. I had co-signed that loan application, hoping it might finally earn me the respect and recognition I craved. But standing in the fading light of my graduation party, watching Nathan accept congratulations meant for me, I realized no loan co-signature would change the fundamental dynamic of our relationship. I would always be the supportive character in Nathan's story, never the protagonist of my own. As the last guests departed, and my parents began cleaning up, making plans to help Nathan with his bar the following weekend, I quietly went upstairs to my childhood bedroom. The loan paperwork was still in my desk drawer, copies I had kept for my records. I pulled them out and read through the terms again, seeing with fresh eyes what I had committed to. If Nathan defaulted, which seemed increasingly likely given his track record, I would be responsible for $100,000 plus interest. My future, my financial stability, my independence, all tied to Nathan's latest whim. That night I barely slept, turning over 2 decades of memories and patterns. By dawn I knew what I needed to do. Alone in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by academic trophies that had never earned me the approval I sought, I spread the loan paperwork across my desk. The cosigner withdrawal form had been included in the packet, a simple document that would remove my financial liability. I picked up a pen, then set it down again. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to put myself first for once? My mind raced through a lifetime of memories, Nathan borrowing my brand new bike when I was 7, returning it with a bent wheel and no apology. Nathan reading my private journal to his friends when I was 13, laughing at my adolescent thoughts and insecurities. Nathan accidentally spilling soda on my laptop the night before a major project was due in high school. I remembered the college acceptance letters I had proudly shown my parents, only to have them glance quickly before asking if Nathan needed money for his car payment. I recalled graduation day just a week earlier, scanning the audience during my departmental honors recognition, finding only empty seats where my family should have been. Then there was today, my graduation party. Nathan turning my moment of achievement into another opportunity to belittle me. Crazy, you finished, you'll probably end up jobless anyway. My father's chuckle of approval. my mother's silent complicity. For 23 years, I had been trying to earn their approval through achievement, responsibility, and self-sacrifice. For 23 years, I had failed. I stared at the loan document, the magnitude of my potential financial liability sinking in. $100,000. With my name attached, my credit on the line, my future mortgaged for a brother who couldn't even show me basic respect. What would happen if, when Nathan failed to make payments, I'd be starting my career with a massive debt that wasn't even mine? I'd be trapped, unable to get my own apartment, my own car, my own life. I'd be tethered to Nathan's failures for years, possibly decades. And would they even appreciate the sacrifice? Or would it become just another expectation, another example of what family does? My hands began to tremble as clarity washed over me. This wasn't about the money. It was about recognizing my own worth, about understanding that I deserved basic respect, not constant belittlement, about finally setting boundaries after years of having none. I picked up the pen again, this time with resolve. I filled out the cosigner removal form carefully, making sure every field was complete and accurate. I signed my name with a steadiness that surprised me. It was nearly midnight when I finished. The house was quiet, my parents and Nathan asleep. I changed into jeans and a sweatshirt, grabbed my keys and the form, and slipped out to my car. The night air was cool against my face as I drove through the sleeping neighborhood. The bank had a 24-hour drop box for after-hours document submission, a small metal slot in the wall beside the ATM. I parked and sat for a moment, the form on my passenger seat, illuminated by the overhead light. Was I being selfish? Was I betraying my family? The questions nagged at me, familiar guilt rising like bile. Then I remembered Nathan's toast again. The way he'd so casually dismissed 4 years of my hard work. The way he'd laughed about using my good credit. The way he'd called me a little nerd who was finally useful for something. I got out of the car, walked to the drop box, and slid the form into the slot before I could second-guess myself again. There was a quiet thump as it fell inside. Done. Irreversible. The drive home felt surreal. I had never defied my family before, never prioritized my needs over theirs, especially not over Nathan's. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I kept waiting for regret to overtake me, but instead a strange sense of liberation began to grow. Back home, I slipped into bed but couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, imagining tomorrow's fallout. Would the bank call immediately? How quickly would Nathan realize what I'd done? How would my parents react? Morning came after a restless night. I dressed and headed downstairs, finding my parents and Nathan at the breakfast table. They were discussing the bar as if yesterday's party had never happened. "I'm thinking we go with the sports memorabilia theme in the main area," Nathan was saying, gesturing with his fork. "Signed jerseys, vintage equipment, that kind of thing." "Sounds wonderful, honey," Mom replied, refilling his coffee cup. "The loan should be approved any day now," Dad added confidently. "With Lincoln's name on the application, it's practically guaranteed." They all looked up as I entered the kitchen. Mom smiled distractedly. "Good morning, Lincoln. There's coffee in the pot." I poured myself a cup, sat down, and waited. The clock on the microwave read 8:40. The bank would open at 9. It was only a matter of time. The kitchen clock ticked steadily as we sat around the breakfast table. Nathan was still talking about his bar plans, sketching layout ideas on a napkin, while Mom and Dad offered suggestions. I remained quiet, nursing my coffee, watching the minutes pass. 9 o'clock came and went. 9:30. My stomach tightened with each passing moment. Had the bank received my form, would they process it today? At precisely 9:12, Nathan's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his face brightening. "It's the bank," he announced, standing up, probably calling about the loan approval. He answered with confidence, moving toward the living room for privacy. "Hello, yes, this is Nathan speaking." I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could see Nathan's expression change from anticipation to confusion, then to disbelief. "What do you mean, denied? That can't be right," his voice rose. "We submitted everything correctly. My brother co-signed. His credit score is practically perfect." More silence. As he listened, his face growing increasingly red. "Withdrawn." What are you talking about? No one withdrew anything. Another pause. When last night, that's impossible. My parents exchanged concerned glances. Dad stood up, moving closer to Nathan, trying to understand what was happening. Can you reprocess it? There must be some mistake. Nathan pleaded, his confident demeanor crumbling. No, don't close the application. We need this loan. The call ended with Nathan staring at his phone in shock. They said the cosigner withdrew last night. The application is being closed. His eyes slowly lifted to meet mine, realization dawning. Lincoln, did you? I met his gaze steadily. Yes. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom gasped. Dad's mouth opened and closed without words. I need some air, I said quietly, standing up and heading for the door. Lincoln, wait, Mom called, but I kept walking. I grabbed my keys and wallet, slipped on my shoes, and left the house before anyone could stop me. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Nathan in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. My phone buzzed before I reached the end of the street. A text from Nathan, all capital letters. What did you do? The loan got rejected, call me now. I pulled over and typed a calm response. I removed myself as cosigner. I'm not comfortable putting my financial future at risk. More texts flooded in. You can't do this to me. The bar deal will fall through without that loan. Mom and Dad are freaking out. I thought we were family. That last one hit a nerve. Family. The word had been used to manipulate me for years. Family helps each other. Family sacrifices. Family puts others first. But when had Nathan ever put anyone ahead of himself? My phone started ringing, Mom calling. I silenced it and drove to a coffee shop across town, a quiet place where I could gather my thoughts. As I sat with my latte, the notifications continued. 3 missed calls from Mom, 5 from Nathan, 1 from Dad, voicemails and texts piling up. I called James, needing a friendly voice. Hey, can you meet me at Riverside Coffee? I could use some moral support. 20 minutes later, James slid into the seat across from me. You look like hell, he observed. I removed myself from Nathan's loan application, I explained. They found out this morning. James nodded slowly. About time you stood up to them. That toast yesterday was brutal. It wasn't just the toast, I sighed. It's been my whole life. James listened as I unpacked years of being second best, of Nathan's constant undermining of my parents' blind spot when it came to their golden child. It felt good to verbalize what I had kept inside for so long. You did the right thing, James assured me when I finished. That loan would have ruined you financially. They're making me feel like I betrayed them, I admitted. Like I'm the villain here. Classic manipulation, James replied. They're angry because you disrupted the dynamic. Nathan needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet. As we talked, the coffee shop door burst open. Nathan stormed in, scanning the room until he spotted us. His face was flushed, his movements jerky with anger. There you are, he growled, approaching our table. You need to fix this. Now. Heads turned at his loud voice. I felt my chest tighten with anxiety, but forced myself to remain calm. I'm not changing my mind, Nathan. Do you have any idea what you've done? He hissed, leaning over the table. I put down a deposit on that building. I've hired staff. I've ordered inventory. That sounds like poor planning, I replied evenly. You shouldn't have done all that before securing financing. His eyes widened at my response. He wasn't used to me pushing back. You said you would co-sign. You gave your word. And you said you'd repay the loan, I countered. But your track record doesn't inspire confidence. I'm not risking my financial future on another one of your schemes. Schemes, he sputtered. This is a legitimate business opportunity. Just like the power washing service, the dropshipping website, the food truck. I shook my head. I'm not doing this anymore, Nathan. I'm not your safety net. Several people were watching now, uncomfortable witnesses to our family drama. Nathan noticed the attention and lowered his voice, though his intensity didn't diminish. Mom and Dad are devastated, he said, switching tactics. They can't believe you'd do this to your own brother. I didn't do anything to you, I replied. I simply chose not to put myself at financial risk. There's a difference. Nathan's face darkened. You've always been jealous of me. This is your revenge for all the times I outshined you." James snorted, earning a glare from Nathan. "This isn't about jealousy," I said. "It's about self-respect, something I should have developed a long time ago." Nathan stared at me, seemingly at a loss for words. Then he straightened up his jaw tight. "This isn't over. You're coming home right now to talk to Mom and Dad." It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. In the past, I might have complied, just to keep the peace, but not today. "I'll come home when I'm ready," I said firmly, "and we'll have a family discussion like adults." Nathan's nostrils flared. For a moment, I thought he might cause a scene right there in the coffee shop. Instead, he pointed a finger at me. "Be home by noon, or don't bother coming back at all." With that, he turned and stormed out the door, slamming behind him. James whistled low. That went well. I let out a shaky breath, the adrenaline leaving my system. I have to go back and face them eventually. "Want me to come with you?" James offered. I considered it, then shook my head. This is something I need to do myself." We finished our coffees, talking through potential scenarios and outcomes. By 11:30, I felt prepared enough to return home and face whatever awaited me. "Call me if you need an extraction," James said as we parted in the parking lot. "I can be there in 15 minutes. I nodded gratefully, then got in my car and headed back to the house, unsure of what reception awaited me, but certain that things would never be the same again. The drive home felt like marching toward a battlefield. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, but my resolve remained firm. Years of suppressed feelings and unspoken truths were about to surface, and there was no turning back. I pulled into the driveway at 11:58, 2 minutes before Nathan's ultimatum expired. The house looked deceptively peaceful from outside, no indication of the storm brewing within. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door and entered. Voices from the living room fell silent at the sound of my arrival. I hung my keys on the hook by the door, a small, normal action that felt strangely significant in the moment. I found them all waiting. Mom perched anxiously on the edge of the sofa, Dad standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed, and Nathan pacing between them like a caged animal. Finally, Nathan snapped when I appeared in the doorway. "Time to fix the mess you've made." "Lincoln, sit down," Dad said, gesturing to an armchair across from Mom. His tone was measured but cold. "We need to discuss what you've done." I took the offered seat, noticing how they had positioned themselves 3 against 1. The family dynamic visualized perfectly in our seating arrangement. "Why would you do this?" Mom asked, her voice wavering between hurt and anger. "Why would you sabotage your brother's future like this?" The question revealed so much about how they viewed the situation and me. In their minds, I was the saboteur. Nathan was the victim. Nothing new there. "I'm not sabotaging anyone," I replied calmly. "I'm protecting my own future." "By breaking a promise," Dad countered. "You gave your word you'd co-sign that loan." I reconsidered after yesterday's graduation party. I explained, looking directly at Nathan, after being publicly humiliated by the very person I was trying to help. Nathan rolled his eyes. "It was a joke, Lincoln. Lighten up." "It wasn't funny," I said. "None of it has ever been funny. Not the put-downs, not the backhanded compliments, not the constant dismissal of my accomplishments." "What are you talking about?" Mom asked, genuinely confused. "We've always been supportive of your academics." "Support isn't just saying good job." And then immediately shifting attention back to Nathan, I replied, "It's showing up when it matters. It's celebrating achievements without qualification. It's basic respect." "This isn't about respect," Nathan interrupted. "It's about the loan. You need to go back to the bank today and reinstate your co-signature." I shook my head. "That's not going to happen." Lincoln, Dad's voice took on the authoritative tone that had always ended discussions in our house. "This is what family does. We help each other. Your brother needs this loan." "I've been helping for years," I countered. "I've loaned money that was never repaid. I've had my possessions borrowed and returned damaged. I've watched my achievements diminished, while Nathan's attempts were celebrated regardless of outcome." "That's not true," Mom protested weakly. Isn't it? I challenged. Where were you during my departmental honors ceremony last week, the one I specifically invited you to? Mom and Dad exchanged uncomfortable glances. Nathan needed help looking at potential bar locations, Dad admitted. Exactly my point, I said. Nathan always comes first. Always has, always will. And I've accepted that for 23 years. But I won't jeopardize my financial future for someone who can't even show me basic respect. Nathan's face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You're acting like some victim when you've had everything handed to you. Full ride scholarship, perfect credit score, job interviews lined up. Nothing was handed to me, I replied, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I earned every single one of those things through hard work and discipline, things you know nothing about. Boys, Mom interjected, this isn't helping. You want to know the truth. Lincoln Nathan stepped closer, looming over my chair. I was never going to pay back that loan anyway. The room fell silent at his admission. Nathan, Mom gasped. What, it's the truth? He continued, too angry now to filter himself. My credit is shot from the other businesses. No bank would give me a loan on my own. Lincoln was my only option with his perfect credit and new fancy degree. Dad rubbed his forehead, looking suddenly tired. Son, that's not what we discussed. Oh, please, Nathan scoffed. We all knew how this would play out. Lincoln would co-sign, I'd make payments for a few months, then claim business was slow. Eventually, Lincoln would take over payments because he's Mr. Responsible. I stared at my brother, somehow both shocked and not surprised at all by his admission. You were planning to default deliberately? I was planning to build a successful business, Nathan backpedaled slightly. But I needed a backup plan. That's just smart business. That's fraud, I corrected him. And it would have destroyed my credit and financial future. Don't be so dramatic, Nathan dismissed. You'd recover eventually. I looked between my parents, searching their faces for shock or disapproval at Nathan's admission. I found concern but not surprise. On some level, they had known or at least suspected what Nathan intended. Did you know about this? I asked them directly. Of course not, Mom answered quickly. Too quickly. Dad was more measured. We hoped Nathan would make it work this time, but we also knew you'd be there as a safety net if needed. A safety net. I repeated the words, bitter in my mouth. That's all I am to this family, isn't it? Nathan's safety net. The responsible one who will clean up his messes. That's not fair, Mom protested. Isn't it? I stood up, no longer willing to physically look up at them. When has Nathan ever been my safety net? When has he ever put my needs first? When have any of you? The question hung in the air unanswered. Lincoln Dad began, his tone softening slightly. Family helps family. That's just how it works. No, I said firmly. Healthy families support each other mutually. They respect boundaries. They celebrate each other's successes without jealousy or dismissal. So what are you saying? Nathan demanded. You won't help me at all. I'm saying I won't co-sign a loan that you've admitted you plan to default on, I clarified. And I'm saying things need to change in this family if I'm going to remain part of it. Are you threatening to cut us off? Mom looked horrified. I'm setting boundaries, I corrected her. Either you acknowledge the pattern of favoritism and disrespect, and we work together to change it, or I'll need to distance myself for my own well-being. This is ridiculous. Nathan threw up his hands. He doesn't get the loan, so now he's throwing a tantrum. This isn't about the loan, I repeated. It's about 23 years of being treated like I matter less than Nathan. 23 years of having my achievements diminished, while his failures are excused. 23 years of giving without receiving. I turned to my parents. Can you honestly say you've treated us equally? That you've given us the same support, attention, and respect? Mom looked down at her hands. Dad's gaze shifted to the window. Their silence was answer enough. I love you all, I said, surprised to find I meant it despite everything. But I won't be disrespected anymore. I won't be Nathan's backup plan or financial safety net. I need to build my own life, and I need you to respect that. So that's it. Nathan's voice dripped with contempt. You're abandoning your family when we need you most. I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied. I'm asking to be treated with respect. The loan is off the table, but I'm still here willing to have a relationship if things change. Things don't need to change, Dad said, his voice hardening again. You need to remember your family obligations. And there it was, the confirmation that nothing would change. Not today, maybe not ever. I think I need some time away, I said quietly. I'll stay with James for a while until I find my own place. You're overreacting, Mom said, panic edging into her voice. Nathan said things he didn't mean. We can work this out. But Nathan's expression told a different story. He wasn't sorry. He was angry that his plan had failed, that his safety net had developed a spine. I'll go pack some things, I said, heading for the stairs. If you walk out that door, Nathan called after me, don't expect us to welcome you back with open arms when you fail on your own. I paused on the stairs, turning back to face my brother one last time. I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed on yours. In my bedroom, I quickly packed essentials into a duffel bag: clothes, toiletries, laptop, and important documents. My phone buzzed with a text from James. All good, I replied. Coming to crash at your place. We'll explain later. As I zipped the bag closed, Mom appeared in the doorway. Lincoln, please don't do this. We can talk more. We've been talking for hours, Mom, I sighed. But nothing's going to change. Not right now. Of course we'll change, she promised, though her eyes darted nervously toward the stairs where Dad and Nathan waited. Just give us some time. That's what I'm doing, I replied, hoisting the bag onto my shoulder, giving us all time and space. Downstairs, Dad stood with his arms crossed, his expression stoic. Nathan wasn't visible, probably sulking in the kitchen. This is a mistake, Dad said as I reached the door. Family should stick together. I agree, I replied. But family should also respect each other. When you're ready for that, you know how to reach me. I walked out to my car, loaded my bag in the trunk, and drove away from the only home I'd ever known. In the rearview mirror, I could see my parents standing in the doorway watching me leave. Nathan was notably absent. A chapter of my life was ending. A new one, uncertain but filled with possibility, was about to begin. The first night at James's apartment was strange. His spare room was barely large enough for a twin mattress and my duffel bag, but it represented something I had never fully experienced: independence. Stay as long as you need, James offered, handing me a spare key. It's not much, but it's drama-free. Thanks, I said, the word inadequate for my gratitude. This is temporary. I'll start apartment hunting tomorrow. James shrugged. No rush. Focus on those job interviews first. Those first 2 weeks were a crash course in adult independence. I had my own money savings from internships and part-time work, but limited experience managing completely on my own. I created a budget, researched apartments within my price range, and prepared meticulously for my upcoming interviews. My phone remained eerily silent. Mom had texted twice, once to ask if I was okay, and again to tell me Nathan was really struggling with my decision. Dad hadn't reached out at all. Nathan had sent one message, asking if I had come to my senses yet. I left them all unanswered, needing space to find my footing. My first interview was with a tech startup developing educational software. The office was modern and bright, the team young and enthusiastic. I presented my portfolio of projects from college, explained my approach to problem solving, and discussed my vision for making educational technology more accessible. When can you start? The hiring manager asked at the end of our conversation. I blinked in surprise. You're offering me the position? She nodded. Your technical skills are impressive, but what really stands out is your thoughtfulness. We need people who can think beyond the code. The starting salary was modest but fair for an entry-level position. More importantly, it was enough for me to get my own place and begin building a life independent from my family's influence. I signed the paperwork that afternoon and called James with the news. Celebration dinner tonight, he insisted. First round's on me. That weekend, I found a small studio apartment not far from the office. It was basic, just one main room with a kitchenette and a tiny bathroom, but the large windows let in plenty of natural light and the location was perfect. The landlord ran a credit check, nodded approvingly at my score, and handed over the keys. Standing alone in my empty apartment, I felt a strange mix of pride and terror. This was mine, my space, my responsibility, my freedom. I furnished it sparsely at first, a mattress on the floor, a second-hand desk, and chair, a few kitchen essentials. Each paycheck allowed for small improvements, a proper bed frame, a comfortable couch, a bookshelf for my computer science texts and programming manuals. 3 weeks into my new job, I received an alarming email notification. Someone had attempted to apply for a credit card in my name. The fraud detection system had flagged it as suspicious and declined the application. I immediately called the credit card company for details. The application had been submitted with my social security number and previous address, but a different phone number. My stomach sank as I realized what had happened. Nathan had tried to use my information to secure credit. I spent the evening placing fraud alerts on my credit reports, changing passwords, and implementing additional security measures. The violation left me shaken but more certain than ever that I had made the right decision in distancing myself. The next day I received a text from Mom. Nathan says someone must have stolen his identity too. Strange coincidence. I didn't bother responding. There was no coincidence, and we both knew it. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects, volunteering for extra assignments, and staying late to improve my skills. My team lead noticed my dedication. "Don't burn yourself out," she cautioned. "This is a marathon, not a sprint." But work was more than a job for me. It was validation. Here my contributions were recognized. My ideas were heard. My efforts were appreciated. The contrast with my family dynamic couldn't have been starker. I began making friends among my colleagues. We'd gather for happy hours or weekend hikes, relationships built on mutual respect and shared interests rather than obligation. I discovered I was more social than I'd believed. I had simply needed the right environment to flourish. 3 months into my job, I was assigned to lead a small project team developing a new feature for our main product. The responsibility was both terrifying and exhilarating. I scheduled meetings, delegated tasks, and managed timelines, discovering leadership abilities I hadn't known I possessed. When we delivered the feature on time and under budget, our CEO personally commended our work during the company all-hands meeting. "Lincoln showed exceptional leadership," he noted. "This is exactly the kind of initiative we value here." That evening I called James to share the news. "They're already talking about a promotion track," I told him, still a bit dazed by the recognition. "Not surprised," James replied. "You were always capable. You just needed people who could see it." As summer turned to fall, I settled into a rhythm of work, social activities, and personal projects. I had joined a local coding meetup where I was helping mentor beginners. I had started taking weekend hikes in the nearby state park. I was building a life that felt authentically mine. Occasionally, news of my family reached me through mutual acquaintances. Nathan's bar plans had indeed collapsed without financing. He had moved back home temporarily, while pursuing his next venture, some kind of subscription box service for sports fans. 6 months after starting my job, I received my first performance review. My manager was effusive in her praise, noting my technical skills, team collaboration, and creative problem-solving. She slid a paper across the desk, a promotion offer, with a substantial salary increase. "We don't normally do this so soon," she explained, "but you've become indispensable to the team." I signed the paperwork with a steady hand, remembering Nathan's graduation toast. "Crazy you finished. You'll probably end up jobless anyway." The memory no longer stung. Instead, it fueled my determination to succeed on my own terms. That Thanksgiving, I declined my mother's tentative invitation to come home for the holiday. Instead, I joined a Friendsgiving, hosted by a colleague who had gathered other holiday orphans with nowhere to go. Surrounded by new friends contributing my admittedly amateur cooking skills to the communal meal, I realized I had built something precious, a chosen family based on mutual respect and genuine affection. As Christmas approached, the inevitable family pressure increased. Mom called several times, her voice increasingly desperate. "It's Christmas, Lincoln. Family should be together at Christmas." I remained firm but gentle. "I'm not ready, Mom. Maybe next year." What I didn't tell her was that Nathan had recently texted me asking for money, just a small loan to tide me over until my new business takes off. I had blocked his number immediately afterward. Instead of going home, I volunteered at a local shelter, serving holiday meals, then spent Christmas evening with James and his girlfriend exchanging modest gifts and watching classic movies. It wasn't the traditional family Christmas I had grown up with, but it was warm, genuine, and drama-free. By spring, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small condo closer to the city center. The purchase represented more than just property ownership, it was tangible proof of my independence and success. As I signed the closing documents, I remembered the loan I had refused to co-sign for Nathan. In just 1 year, I had gone from nearly committing to a 6-figure debt for someone else's dream to investing in my own future. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. The day I moved into my condo, I received an unexpected email from my father, the first direct communication since I had left home. "Your mother and I drove by your new place yesterday," he wrote. "Looks nice. Things are difficult here. Nathan's latest venture failed. He's struggling. We're struggling too financially. Call when you can." I sat on my new couch in my new home staring at those words. No congratulations on the condo, no acknowledgement of my success, just an implied request for help after a year of silence. I closed the email without responding, not yet ready to reopen that door. My phone buzzed with texts from friends offering to help with unpacking and arranging furniture. These were people who celebrated my successes without qualification, who supported me without exploitation. As I looked around at my new home, I realized I had built more than just a career and a place to live. I had built self-respect, boundaries, and authentic relationships. I had discovered my own worth independent of family validation. And that perhaps was the greatest achievement of all. 1 year turned into 2. My career continued to flourish with another promotion and increasing responsibilities. I had established myself as a respected developer in the local tech community, occasionally speaking at conferences and mentoring junior programmers. My personal life had expanded in ways I never anticipated. I had developed a close circle of friends who shared my interests and values. I had even started dating Melissa, a UX designer I met at a tech meetup, whose quick wit and genuine warmth had gradually broken through my carefully constructed walls. I had found my place in the world independent of the family dynamics that had defined my earlier years. Then on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, an email appeared in my inbox. "Lincoln, I was hoping we could meet for coffee sometime this week. There are things I need to say in person. Mom." I stared at those words, my finger hovering over the delete button. 2 years of minimal contact, occasional brief text exchanges on holidays and birthdays, but nothing substantial. Why now? After sleeping on it, I replied with a time and place, a neutral coffee shop downtown, busy enough to discourage drama but quiet enough for conversation. She was already waiting when I arrived, looking smaller, somehow more fragile than I remembered. Her hair had more gray and fine lines had formed around her eyes. She stood awkwardly when she saw me, as if unsure whether to offer a hug. I made the decision for her, stepping forward and embracing her briefly before sitting down. "You look good," she said, studying my face. "Healthy. Happy." "I am," I confirmed. "Work is great. I just bought a newer, larger condo. Life is good." She nodded, twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit I had forgotten until that moment. "Lincoln, I owe you an apology," she began, her voice unsteady. "A long overdue apology." I stayed silent, giving her space to continue. "You were right about the favoritism," she admitted. "Your father and I. We always gave Nathan more leeway, more attention. We made excuses for his behavior while holding you to a higher standard." The acknowledgement so long desired felt surreal. "What brought this on?" I asked, not unkindly. She sighed deeply. "Reality has a way of catching up eventually. Nathan's latest failure cost us nearly everything." "What happened?" "He convinced your father to remortgage the house to fund another business venture, some kind of sports memorabilia authentication service." She shook her head. "It collapsed within months. The bank foreclosed 3 weeks ago." I felt a pang of sympathy despite myself. "Where are you staying?" "With my sister for now," she replied. "Your father's pride island. It's been difficult for him." "And Nathan?" Her expression hardened slightly. "He moved in with a girlfriend the day before the foreclosure. Hasn't called since." The irony wasn't lost on me. Nathan, the golden child who could do no wrong, had abandoned them when they needed him most. I, the one who had been labeled selfish for establishing boundaries, was sitting here listening to my mother's troubles. I'm sorry to hear that I said and meant it. No matter our past, I didn't wish homelessness on my parents. We made so many mistakes, Lincoln. She continued, tears welling in her eyes. We enabled Nathan's worst traits. We took your responsibility and reliability for granted. We never gave you the recognition you deserved. I had imagined this conversation many times over the years, but the reality was more complicated than my fantasies. There was no satisfaction in seeing my mother broken, in hearing her admit what I had always known to be true. Why are you telling me this now? I asked gently. Because you deserved to hear it years ago, she replied. And because I miss my son, the good one, the one who built a life to be proud of despite our failures as parents. We talked for nearly 3 hours, covering ground I had never expected to traverse with my mother. She spoke candidly about the patterns that had developed since our childhood, about her growing awareness of the damage they had caused, about her regrets. I'm not asking for money, she clarified when our conversation began to wind down. I want to be clear about that. Your father and I will figure something out. I appreciate that, I said, realizing she was trying in her own way to respect the boundaries I had established. As we prepared to leave, I made a decision. I can't fix everything, Mom, and I won't enable Nathan again. But I can help you and Dad get back on your feet. Not with cash, but maybe I could co-sign a lease for an apartment until you rebuild your credit. The offer surprised us both. You would do that after everything? You're still my parents, I said simply. But this time there would be clear terms and expectations. 2 weeks later, I met with my father for the first time since leaving home. The meeting was awkward, his pride clearly wounded by the reversal in our circumstances. But beneath the discomfort, I sensed something new: respect. You've done well for yourself, he acknowledged gruffly, as we toured a modest apartment I had found for them. Built something solid. Coming from him, it was tantamount to a standing ovation. I helped them secure the lease with my co-signature, established a timeline for them to rebuild their credit, and set clear boundaries about financial responsibility. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but a cautious new beginning. Nathan remained conspicuously absent for several months. Then, just as my parents were settling into their new routine, he reappeared, broke single again, and looking for a place to stay. To my surprise, it was my father who established the boundary. You can sleep on our couch for 2 weeks, he told Nathan firmly. During that time, you need to find a job, any job, and start contributing. Nathan, unused to such limitations, looked to me for intervention. Lincoln, come on. You know how hard the job market is right now. Actually, I know several places hiring entry-level positions, I replied, refusing to fall back into old patterns. I'm happy to send you the listings. The shock on his face would have been comical in another context. To everyone's surprise, including perhaps his own, Nathan complied with the new expectations. He found work as a bartender at a local sports bar, ironically the very industry he had once hoped to enter as an owner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Our relationship remained distant but civil. The old dynamics occasionally resurfaced in small ways, but now there was awareness on all sides, and corrections were made before patterns could re-establish themselves. One evening, about 6 months after our family's reluctant reconnection, Nathan asked if we could meet for a beer after his shift. Curious, I agreed. We sat at a quiet corner table, the awkwardness between us palpable. Nathan fidgeted with his coaster, uncharacteristically hesitant. I owe you an apology. He finally said the words, clearly difficult for him. A big one. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. I've had a lot of time to think about why my life kept imploding, he admitted. And I realized I've never really faced consequences before. You and Mom and Dad always cleaned up my messes. That's true, I agreed, neither accusatory nor conciliatory. When you pulled your name from that loan application, it was the first time anyone had ever really said no to me. He shook his head. I was furious. But looking back, it was probably the best thing anyone's ever done for me. The admission was unexpected, and I suspected genuine. It forced me to face reality, he continued. to recognize that I'm not entitled to success or support, that I actually have to earn things like you always did. We talked for hours that night, more honestly than we ever had before. There were moments of tension and old hurts revisited, but also moments of surprising connection. Nathan was changing slowly and imperfectly, but genuinely. "I don't expect us to be best friends," he said as we prepared to leave. "Too much water under that bridge. But I'd like to try being brothers, real ones, not whatever twisted version we were before." I extended my hand and he shook it firmly. "I'd like that too," I said, and meant it. The path to healing our family wasn't straightforward or quick. There were setbacks and old habits that died hard. But gradually, a new dynamic emerged, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation, on earned trust rather than assumed entitlement. My parents found new jobs and eventually moved into their own apartment without my co-signature. Nathan stuck with bartending, eventually moving into management, finding satisfaction in steady incremental progress rather than get-rich-quick schemes. And I continued building my life now with the added dimension of family relationships that added to my happiness rather than diminishing it. 3 years after that fateful graduation party, I hosted Thanksgiving at my condo. My parents and Nathan came, as did James, Melissa, and a few close friends. As we gathered around the table, I looked at the unlikely assembly, my biological family and chosen family together in my home. "I'd like to make a toast," Nathan said, raising his glass. Everyone fell silent, perhaps remembering as I did the last notable toast he had given. But his words this time were different. "To Lincoln," he said simply, "for having the courage to break the cycle. We're all better for it." The journey from that graduation party to this moment had been long and often painful. But looking around at the faces of people who truly saw and valued me, I knew it had been worth every difficult step. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the most loving choice is to set boundaries. And sometimes the family you rebuild can be stronger and healthier than the one you were born into. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with people you love? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. Remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential for healthy relationships. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' inability to see your value.